Night had fallen over the packed Nashville ballpark, but the bright stadium lights revealed a scene of growing tension. Ray Walker stood alone at home plate, a 74-year-old Marine veteran clutching the microphone with unsteady hands. He had barely begun the first line of the National Anthem when his voice cracked. A few people in the crowd snickered. It was a small stumble, but under the weight of 20 or 30,000 eyes, it felt like a catastrophe. A ripple of murmurs spread through the stands. The flag fluttered gently in the outfield, but the audience's patience was wearing thin. "Come on, old-timer, just sing it right." A young man's shout rang out, cutting through the night. Scattered laughter followed. Ray's heart pounded in his chest. He tightened his grip on the mic, trying to steady himself, but the nervous tremor in his voice only grew. The once respectful hush of the stadium was breaking. Here and there, isolated boos began to echo. Ray's eyes brimmed with tears that he refused to let fall. This song was supposed to be his tribute to his country, to his fallen brothers, but now every painful second on that field felt like an eternity. He could almost feel the sting of each boo hitting him, piercing through years of pride and turning it into shame. Up in the stands, a few more people jeered. The stadium's impatience was curdling into disrespect. Just when it felt like the whole world was mocking him, something extraordinary happened. High in section 310, a lone figure rose from his seat. An older man with a commanding presence removed his cap and brought it to his chest. In a crisp, reverent motion, he raised his right hand in a salute toward the flag. One by one, people near him began to notice and fell silent. A hush started to spread through the stadium as more eyes caught sight of the man standing at attention. Ray opened his eyes, voice faltering to silence, and saw the unbelievable sight. Thousands were no longer jeering. They were standing. An eerie quiet blanketed the crowd. It was as if a switch had been flipped in the soul of every spectator, all because one man decided enough was enough. In that frozen moment, 30,000 faces looked on, and the trajectory of the night changed in an instant. If you also believe that no veteran should ever be humiliated like this, join us by subscribing. Earlier that evening, Ray Walker sat on the edge of his bed, staring at a weathered photograph from 1970. In the photo, a much younger Ray stood in a jungle clearing in Vietnam, arm in arm with two fellow Marines. One of them, his best friend Samuel, had a broad grin and was holding a little transistor radio that had been playing the Star-Spangled Banner. Ray's fingers trembled slightly as he traced over Samuel's face. "This one's for you, buddy," he whispered, folding the photo carefully and tucking it into his shirt pocket. In the living room, Ray's daughter Michelle gently cleared her throat. "Dad, it's almost time to go," she said softly, trying not to startle him. Ray stood up slowly, smoothing out the front of his navy blue blazer. On the lapel, he wore a small Marine Corps pin alongside a tiny American flag. "I'm ready," he replied, though his voice was quiet. Michelle gave him a concerned smile. "You sure you want to do this? You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she said, adjusting the collar of his shirt the same way she used to when she was little. Ray managed a faint grin. "I know I don't have to. I want to. They asked for a veteran to sing and, well, I gave my word. I'm doing this for my brothers who aren't here to sing it themselves." Half an hour later, they arrived at the stadium as the sun was setting. It was Veterans Appreciation Night at the Nashville ballpark, and the game had drawn a much larger crowd than usual. Red, white, and blue banners hung at the entrance, and dozens of fellow veterans, some in uniform, some wearing old service caps, milled about with their families. As Ray walked through the players' tunnel, he could hear the distant roar of the crowd outside. A sudden cheer from the stands as the home team took batting practice made him flinch. It was louder than he expected. He paused, taking a deep breath and recalling the grounding techniques he'd learned in therapy. "Focus, Ray. It's just noise, not gunfire," he murmured to himself, one hand lightly tapping the photo in his pocket for courage. Near the dugout, a young event coordinator greeted Ray with an enthusiastic handshake. "We're honored to have you here tonight, Mr. Walker," the man said sincerely. He quickly went over the plan. The announcer would introduce Ray over the PA system. A spotlight would focus on him at home plate, and then Ray would singing the National Anthem, a cappella. Ray's throat felt dry, but he nodded in agreement, forcing a small smile. Michelle stood by his side, squeezing his hand supportively until the very last moment when he had to step out onto the field. "You've got this, Dad," she whispered, her eyes shining with pride. Ray gave her fingers a grateful squeeze in return. When the announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for our national anthem, performed tonight by Vietnam War veteran Raymond Ray Walker." The stadium erupted in applause. Ray hadn't expected such a warm welcome, and for a moment, emotion caught in his throat. He stepped out under the brilliant lights, the vast sea of spectators coming into view as he walked toward the microphone at home plate. Among them, he saw families already standing with hands over their hearts, and clusters of young men in team jerseys still shuffling to their seats. A few older gentlemen in the veteran hats had snapped to attention, saluting the flag. High up in one section, a silver-haired man with a particularly straight-backed posture also rose quietly, his presence unannounced, but somehow magnetic. Ray took his position on the field, every nerve in his body tingling. As the crowd settled into an expectant hush, he drew a deep breath and opened his mouth to sing, praying that his voice would hold steady to honor all those he remembered. Would you have the courage to step into the spotlight and honor your heroes like Ray did? Ray's voice quivered as he got through, "Oh, say, can you see?" The notes wobbled, and he knew it. Under tens of thousands of watchful eyes, a tidal wave of nerves crashed over him. He tried to keep his focus on the huge American flag flying above the scoreboard, a trick he'd learned to steady himself. But tonight, it wasn't working. A few lines into the song, his mind went momentarily blank on the lyrics. Ray missed a beat, and "What so proudly we hailed" tumbled out late and off-key. A murmur rustled through the crowd. That one mistake was all it took. Scattered jeers turned into open booing. One voice bellowed the very phrase Ray had feared, "Get off the field!" The words hit him like a slap. Ray's heart lurched. By instinct, he flinched at the hostile sound, the way he once reacted to incoming fire on the battlefield. For a moment, the bright stadium lights and the mass of faces blurred in his vision. He felt dizzy. The microphone shook in his hand as the boos swelled into a thunderous roar. Some people were laughing. Others looked annoyed that their evening was being interrupted. A few veterans in the stands stared in disbelief at the disrespect, but even they seemed frozen, unsure how to respond. Up in row 12 of section 310, General William E. Hayes watched with a deepening frown. The retired five-star general had been sitting anonymously among the crowd, a baseball cap pulled low over his steel-gray hair. But as he saw an old Marine on the field struggling through the anthem and heard the crowd's cruel reaction, Hayes felt his blood boil. This wasn't just any elderly singer. The man down there had worn the uniform just like him. The general had seen too many brave men and women sacrifice their lives for that flag to just sit quietly while a fellow veteran was humiliated. General Hayes pushed himself up from his seat with a determination that belied his years. He removed his cap, revealing his lined, weathered face fully, and pressed the cap against his heart. Then he lifted his right hand in a sharp salute toward the field and the flag beyond it. His motion was crisp and practiced, the kind that can only come from decades of service. "Show some respect," he growled, not shouting, but projecting a firm authority that cut through the chaos around him. Those in his immediate vicinity stopped mid-heckle and turned, startled by the commanding figure standing among them. A man beside the general nudged his friend urgently, eyes wide. "Dude, that's General Hayes," he whispered, recognition and awe in his voice. The whisper spread quickly through the nearby sections. Those who caught sight of the saluting old soldier nudged others and began to stand up as well. Like a ripple in a pond, silence began to expand outward from where the general stood. The boos faltered, then died out entirely. Across the stadium, one after another, spectators were rising to their feet, snatching off caps and placing hands over hearts. The very same crowd that had been on the verge of booing someone off the field moments ago had been transformed into 30,000 chastened, standing souls. In less than a minute, a raucous wall of noise turned into an uncanny, reverent quiet. Down on the field, Ray was trembling, but now it was from relief and disbelief rather than fear. He had expected the worst, to be booed off, maybe even escorted away in disgrace. Instead, he watched in astonishment as the wave of hostility receded before his eyes. The same people who had been yelling at him were now uncharacteristically still, many of them looking profoundly ashamed. Then Ray's gaze found the figure of General Hayes in the stands, standing ramrod straight with his salute held firm. Ray's breath caught in his throat. Of course he recognized that face. Almost every service member alive knew of the legendary General Hayes. Seeing the most respected general of his era openly salute him filled Ray with a surge of strength and pride he hadn't felt since his youth. The old Marine straightened his own posture, drawing his shoulders back. He took a steadying breath, lifted the microphone once more, and prepared to finish the anthem the way it was meant to be sung, with dignity and heart. It only took one salute to turn outrage into reverence. If you believe respect can conquer hate, then please subscribe for more stories like this. Ray poured every ounce of pride and emotion he had into the remaining verses. To his own surprise, his voice rang out steady and strong now, rising above the silence in the stands. The notes that had wobbled before now soared with confidence. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. His baritone gained strength with each line. Many in the crowd exchanged astonished looks as the shaky old man they had mocked transformed into a singer with a voice full of heart and resolve. By the time Ray reached the final lines, "Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?" a few people in the stands had even begun to sing softly along with him. And on, "The land of the free and the home of the brave," Ray held the last word with unexpected power, letting it echo across the hushed stadium. For a split second after he finished, the entire ballpark was utterly still, as if everyone needed an extra moment to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Then, as if on cue, a tidal wave of cheers and applause burst forth. The same crowd that had booed him minutes earlier was now cheering at the top of their lungs. People whistled and hollered in admiration. Some had tears streaming down their faces. The young man who had heckled Ray was clapping furiously, his face red, this time from emotion and regret rather than anger. Strangers turned to each other, marveling at how powerful and poignant the anthem's ending had been. Ray lowered the microphone, his chest heaving. Warm tears were rolling down his cheeks, and this time he did nothing to hide them. They were not tears of pain, but of profound relief and gratitude. He looked up into the stands, squinting against the bright lights. General Hayes was still standing at rigid attention, holding his salute until the very last note ceased reverberating. The two old soldiers locked eyes across the distance. Ray gave a humble, appreciative nod toward him. The general, finally dropping his salute, returned the nod with a proud smile breaking through his formerly stern expression. The announcer's voice came on again, thanking Ray for the beautiful performance, but his words were barely audible above the roar of the crowd. Ray hardly heard it anyway. He was overwhelmed by the moment. As he stepped away from the microphone, Michelle suddenly appeared, running onto the field with an usher's permission. She threw her arms around her father. "You did it, Dad," she whispered, her voice shaking with joy and relief. Ray wrapped his daughter in a tight hug, closing his eyes. "I didn't do it alone," he murmured, thinking of the general up in the stands and all the people who had found their decency in time to stand with him. To Ray's astonishment, the sea of people in the stands began to part near one of the dugouts as General Hayes himself made his way down to the field, escorted by a couple of stadium officials. Ray gently released Michelle and stood up straight, hastily wiping his eyes with the back of his hand as the tall, distinguished figure of Hayes approached across the grass. The crowd, realizing another extraordinary moment was about to happen, gradually fell quiet again. When Ray saw the general up close, he immediately brought his hand up in a crisp Marine salute. General Hayes returned the salute with equal precision, then without a word pulled Ray into a brief brotherly embrace before stepping back and offering his hand. "That was one hell of a performance, Marine," General Hayes said, his voice warm and resonant with approval. Up close, Ray could see the older man's eyes glistened with emotion as well. "Sir, thank you. I wouldn't have made it through without you," Ray replied, his voice thick as he gripped the general's hand in both of his. The general gave a modest shake of his head. "All I did was remind them what honor looks like. You did the rest." Ray felt a weight lift off his shoulders at those words. In that moment, decades of feeling invisible and unappreciated were washed away by a flood of respect. All around them, fans and even the players by the dugouts stood and watched in respectful silence. Many phones were out, recording this meeting of two heroes. A group of younger spectators who had laughed at the start now began an impromptu chant of "Ray, Ray, Ray" that quickly spread through the stadium. Ray flushed in astonishment, a bashful smile creeping onto his face as he glanced around at the chanting crowd. He had never imagined such a dramatic turnaround was possible. Later that night, As the adrenaline subsided and the baseball game eventually got underway, people in the stands found themselves less engrossed in the innings and more in the story they had just become part of. Conversations buzzed about how a single act of integrity had completely changed the atmosphere. During a mid-inning break, several fans even went over to where Ray sat with Michelle to shake his hand or pat him on the back. Some offered tearful apologies for the earlier boos. Others simply thanked him for his service and for reminding them what the anthem truly meant. Local news crews, alerted by social media chatter, had shown up by the seventh inning stretch to capture footage of Ray in the stands and interview attendees who eagerly recounted the general's salute that silenced the crowd. When the final out was recorded and the home team secured a victory, many in attendance felt that the real triumph of the night had little to do with the score. As the crowd began to disperse, Ray and General Hayes found each other one more time near the dugout. In the quiet that follows a game, they exchanged a simple, heartfelt farewell. They each raised a hand in salute, a gesture of mutual respect between two old soldiers. "Semper Fi," Ray said softly, invoking the Marine Corps motto, "Always faithful," as a way of saying thank you. "Always faithful," General Hayes replied in kind, echoing the phrase with a gentle smile. The two men had never met before this night, but their shared love of country and their unwavering commitment to honor had bound them together in those few pivotal moments in a way neither would ever forget. Walking out of the stadium arm in arm with Michelle, Ray felt a deep peace settling in his heart. For the first time in many years, the weight of his past, the nightmares, the loneliness, the guilt, felt a little lighter. Perhaps that burden had been lifted by the voices of an entire stadium now singing with him instead of against him, or by the knowledge that when he stumbled, a stranger had cared enough to lift him up. General Hayes, on his way home with his own family, felt something similar, a renewed faith in the people he had defended all his life. He had seen a crowd let go of ignorance and pride and replace it with understanding and unity. That night, tens of thousands of people learned a powerful lesson. Respect should be given from the very first note of the anthem, not only after you realize the person singing has earned it. And a 74-year-old Marine veteran discovered that he was never truly singing solo. His courage had inspired the better angels in everyone around him. The anthem that began in discord ended in harmony and pride, proving that one person standing up for what's right can inspire an entire stadium to find its conscience. As the brilliant lights of the stadium finally dimmed and the cool night air settled over Nashville, one thing was clear. This had been more than just a baseball game. It had become a testament to the enduring power of respect, compassion, and the courage of two men, one who dared to sing and one who dared to salute, to bring out the best in everyone else